Ezra Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Menachos Samech Vav 66. Wow, 66. Here we go. Hi Lewis. We just began Samech Vav. We're going to start from Samech Hey Amid Beis by the Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, what we're discussing over here is the pasuk, the pasuk that said you should count and Sfiras Oimar from Mimachras HaShabbos. So the Tzedukim and the Beis Hosam said Mimachras HaShabbos refers to Sunday, and therefore Shavuos is always on a Sunday. So Chachamim had Kabbalah that Mimachras HaShabbos, this word Shabbos in the pasuk means Yom Tov. Yom Tov is called Shabbosoin. So it means the first day after Pesach, after the first day of Pesach, that's when you bring the Omer. So how did the Gemara know that? So the Gemara brings Tana Rabbanan. Usvartem lechem. The Torah tells you should count for yourself. Shetehei svira l'chol echad v'echad. Everybody has a chiyuv to count svira so'omer. Now the pasuk says, Mimachras HaShabbos. You have to count it the day after Shabbos. That means the day after the first day of Yom Tov. The day after the first day of Pesach, that's when you start counting the Omer. Maybe it means after the first Shabbos, right? You should push it off. Let's say Pesach, the first day of Pesach is on a Monday. Wait till Sunday to count the next Sunday to count the Sfiras Omer. Says the Gemara, a bunch of different opinions. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Harei Omer, the pasuk says Tisbru Chamishim Yom. You have to count 50 days. Anytime you're counting, it has to be 50 days. But if you're going to say Mimachras HaShabbos, you have to wait till Sunday to count. Mimachras Shabbos Bereishis. If sometimes you're going to count 51 days because Pesach, let's say, was on a Friday, then you're going to count 51 days. And sometimes if Pesach is on a Thursday, you're going to count 52 days. Because you're always waiting till Sunday to beginning the first count. But the Torah tells you count 50 days. So it must be that you automatically start counting the first day after Pesach, the first day after the 16th day of Nisan. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't need your drasha, I have another drasha. We go to Amid Aleph, Samach Vav. Harei Omer, the pasuk says Tisparlach. Shiva Shivuas Tisparlach, right? It says 7 weeks you should count. Svira Tluya Bebezdin. It's a counting that is dependent on Bezdin. Yachis Shabbos Bereishis Virasa B'chol Adam. So it's excluding of Shabbos or Shabbos Bereishis. Everybody knows when Shabbos is, but you never know when Pesach is, right? So when the Torah says you count the 7 weeks from a time that you decided the day to start, that must be that the Torah is telling you to start only from Yom Tov, not from Shabbos. The day after Yom Tov, not the day after Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi says, Mimachras Shabbos, Mimachras Yom Tov. It has to be the day after Yom Tov. Mimachras Shabbos means the day after Yom Tov. Maybe the Torah is telling you, start after regular Shabbos. Start the counting. Maybe after, and when we're saying Shabbos, it means regular Shabbos. Omarta. So then if the Torah meant Shabbos and start counting after a regular Shabbos, does the Chumash say start the counting from Shabbos Chalamoid, the day after Shabbos Chalamoid? The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says count the day after Shabbos. So now you're not going to have to figure out what the Torah meant. There's 52 Shabbos in the year, save Doik as a Shabbos. Then you're going to have to scratch your head and try to figure out which Shabbos was the Torah referring to. So it must be that the Torah is not trying to give you an ambiguous statement. It's trying to give you something clear. And the clear way to understand that pasuk is Mimachras Shabbos means the day after you rested, which is Yom Tov, the day after the first day of Pesach. That's one reason Rabbi Yossi says. Another pasuk, never Shabbos lamata, but never Shabbos lamalo. If you look at the pasuk, it says Ad b'mochas Shabbos Shvius Tispru Chamishim Yom. So that end of the pasuk is referring to the end of the 7 weeks. You bring the Shtei Alechem. Well, the Shtei Alechem was brought on the first day of Shavuos right away. So when the Torah is telling you, so the Torah juxtaposes the Shtei Alechem to the Omer. So just like the Shtei Alechem was definitely brought on the first day of Shavuos, so also when the Omer was brought, the Torah means right away at the beginning of Pesach, and not later. So it must be that the Omer was brought after the first day of Pesach, the first day of Chol Hamoed, towards the beginning of the Yom Tov of Pesach. That's his proof. Rab Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Rab Shimon ben Elazar says, now the point of the Omer, right, that you bring on the 16th day of Pesach was to allow you to eat from the new crop. So he has a proof. There's one pasuk says that 6 days you can eat matzahs. And another pasuk that says you eat matzah for 7 days. So there must be one type of matzah that you can only eat for 6 days, and one type of matzah you can eat for 7 days. Old matzah made from the previous year's wheat, you can eat for 7 days. But the matzah from the new crop, you can eat for 6 days. And that could only be possible if you bring the Omer right on the second day of Pesach when you have 6 days left of Pesach. How can you resolve that pasuk? The matzah that you can't eat for 7 days, but at least you should be able to eat it for 6 days. So that ends all the proofs that when the Torah wrote Mimachras Shabbos, it meant Mimachras Yom Tov, the day after the first day of Pesach. Okay, first day of Chol Hamoed. Now the Torah. Now we're just going to try to zero in when do you do the harvesting and counting, and when do you actually bring the Omer? When will you makriv it on the Mizbeach? So what the Gemara is going to conclude is that you harvest at night and you do Sfiras HaOmer at night, like we start Sfiras HaOmer Hayom Yom Echad BaOmer at night, but the bringing is in the daytime. So you actually bring the Omer in on the Mizbeach during the daytime. And that's what the Gemara is saying. I would have thought that you cut, bring the Omer, and then you count whenever you want. Talmud Loima, the Torah tells you when you did the harvesting, that's when you should start counting. So the Torah is pretty adamant that you count right after you bring the Omer. Maybe you harvest and cut, and then whenever you want, you can bring the Omer. You can bring the Omer on the Mizbeach at a later time. From the day that you bring it. So the Torah is trying to tell you that right after you harvest, you have to bring it. So, and then the question is, then maybe you should do the harvesting, do the counting, and bring the Omer all in the daytime. But then there's a problem with the counting. As we know, you have to count complete weeks. When could you count 7 complete weeks? Until you start counting from at nighttime. So you have to have complete days, and in the Jewish time, night comes before day. So you should start counting at night. So then so then do everything at night. Cut, harvest, bring the Omer on the Mizbeach, and count at night. The Torah says the bringing is during the daytime. Okay, Tzad, how you put everything together? And this is the bottom line. Ketzira usvira balayla. They harvested the barley and they counted it at night. They counted Omer at night. And they brought the Omer during the daytime. Now the Gemara goes back just a line or two, and the Gemara goes back to saying that we brought between the last 2 pages, the last Amid and a half of different sources of how do we know that Mimachras Shabbos means the day after Yom Tov Pesach. Maybe it means Shabbos, like the Beis Susan meant. So every Tana had his opinion. But Rav is gonna say that you can't. That every Tana you could ask a question that maybe the Baisusim are correct. Amar Rava, Kuli Isluhu Pircha. I have a question in every source that you're trying to prove that B'Machras Shabbos means Machras Pesach. I have a question. I could still say it means the day after Shabbos. Bar Mitarte, Tanoi Basroi, Bein Masnita Kamaisa, or Bein Masnita Basraisa, the Leslie Pircha. The final two Tanoim that are mentioned in the first Brisa and the final two Tanoim that are mentioned in the second Brisa, I have no question. And he goes in order. The first one was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If you remember yesterday, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, he was debating this this Suduki, and he said like this: I have a proof. And one pasuk says you count 50 days, which means you count days and not weeks. And then the Torah tells you count 7 full weeks. So how do you resolve that? What's a week? A week means you start from Sunday. So when do you start from Sunday, and when do you start just 50 days? So that was Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai's proof. So the Gemara says, Dilma Kedabaya. Maybe the whole that proof is wrong. Maybe you always start counting from Sunday, and the whole point of the Chumash is telling you, mitzvah lemimne yomim, mitzvah lemimne shvuim. There's a mitzvah to count days, and the mitzvah to count nights. So if that's the case, so that's the case. So you could still say that pasuk means that it means you start on counting Sunday, but when you count days and weeks like we do. Imid Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yeshua. If you're going to learn Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yeshua's source, which is Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua's source, that it's dependent on Bezdin, Svira Tluya Bezdin, that the Torah seems to say that that the day that you count the Omer follows a day that Bezdin decided it was a holy day. So it must be it's referring to the first day of Pesach. How do you know? Maybe it's referring to the last day of Pesach. Maybe you start counting for the Omer after Shvi Shel Pesach. So the Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, less Lu Pirchei. What Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira have no question, because they have a juxtaposition between the Shtei Alechem and the Omer. Just like the Shtei Alechem was brought at the beginning of the Yom Tov of Shavuos, so the Omer was also brought at the beginning of Pesach, not in the middle of Chol Hamoed, but the first day of Chol Hamoed. So that you haven't had a question, because it's a hekesh, you don't ask questions. Even Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, if you have Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, he said, the Torah tells you 50 days, but if the Torah was, if counting the Omer was a moving target, right? That was Rabbi Yosef Yehuda in the Bryce at the bottom of the page, right? Then you'll always have 51, maybe some 52, 55, 56. Not true. You're going to start counting from when you start counting. It's 50 days, but you don't count the parts that are not part of the counting. Except those 6 days until you get to Sunday, you don't count those previous days. Even the Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, it might be on the Rishon Kohen, to be on the Achron Kohen. Same question. If it's dependent on Bezdin, so how do you, if the Machras Shabbos means something that's dependent on Bezdin, so how do you know it means the first day of Pesach? Maybe it means you start counting from the last day of Pesach, the day after the last day of Pesach. And Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi has a question. You could see that there's a question behind you to come up. Rabbi Yossi, also you have the same question. What did Rabbi Yossi say? Rabbi Yossi said, here we go. Rabbi Yossi said, you don't know which Shabbos it is. Fine, you don't know which Shabbos it is, but it doesn't tell you definitively that it's Mimachras Shabbos means Mimachras Yom Tov Pesach. It just tells you that it's very hard to determine which Shabbos it is if it meant Shabbos. But that's not such a good raya, and therefore Rabbi Yossi brought his other proof that it's just as plain juxtaposition. Okay, new Gemara, Gufa, and this Gemara just talks about the familiarity of the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Amar Abaya, mitzvah lemimne yoima, mitzvah lemimne shvua. It's a mitzvah to count the days during the Sphere Soima, and also along with it, you count the weeks. Which week are you up to? And Rabbanan, the Bei Rabashi, Mani Yomi, Umani Shvuai. Rabbanan of the house of Rabashi, would, when they counted Sphere Soimer, they counted days and counted weeks. A Maimer money Yoima, V'loy Mani Shvua. A Maimer, you used to count just days, whatever day it is, but he didn't count the weeks. Amar, he said, Zeichel Migdashi. It's only a Zeichel Migdash. It's only Midrabanan to remember how they brought the Omer in the base of Migdash. So you don't have to do it exactly the way it was done. So therefore, he only counted days and not counted weeks. It's very hard to understand that, but that's what Rashi explains. Amemer. So he only counted the days and not counting the weeks. And it's known what the machlekes is, whether it's one long mitzvah or is it 49 separate mitzvahs. We're going to go on to the next Mishnah. Now, the next Mishnah is discussing how they harvested. As you know, it's barley grain, but it had to be toasted, the Torah tells you. So katzru, they harvested the barley grain, the nusua, bakupais, and they put it in boxes. Haviula azara, they brought it to the Beis Hamikdash. They would singe it in fire, so that you mekayim the mitzvah that it should be singed in fire, because the Torah tells you it should be koli, divrei meir. In other words, they did not peel it off to get to the kernel. While it was still in stalks, they made it like you see in the picture over here, they singed it in fire. That's what Reb Meir holds. Comes along Chachamim, no, they peeled it first. They got to the kernel. They would whack it with reeds or with cabbage stalks, soft, in order because the kernels were soft. So they shouldn't squash the kernels. So they sort of separated the kernels from the stalk, and then now you have this bunch of kernels. Nasnul abuv. They put it into a keli that you could put in fire. What does that mean? They put it into a like you see the picture over here. They put it into a vessel, a bronze vessel, which had holes in it, perforated with holes, so you can get the fire through there and singe the kernels. Okay, the abiv hoyamenukav, and this vessel was perforated, so that the fire should singe all of it. And then they spread it all out in the Beis Hamikdash. And the wind dried it out. Then they brought it to a millstone that grinds beans. And then they sifted it. So they brought from this 3 or 5 saw of grain, they made 1 isarim. So let's say from 40 pounds of harvesting, they were able to get just 10 pounds. Bashar, the remainder that they didn't use for the oimer, nivda v'nechal l'chol adam, was redeemed, and anybody could eat it, and they can make the barley bread. But if you make a barley bread, since when you need it, it becomes chayev and challah, so you're obligated chayev upotem in a meiser, and you're not obligated to bring meiser. Why? Because the finishing of this grain, the grinding and making it ready as a final product, was done when it was in Hegdish. And Hegdish is potter for a Maisa. So if you buy it off Hegdish, you're not required to give off tithes. You are obligated Mechala and Maisris if you buy it off Hegdish. Taner Rabbanim, Aviv Ze Aviv. When the Torah says that the pasuk of how the oimer was brought, Aviv Ze Aviv, that means the first of the crop. Koli be'esh. Torah tells you roasted in fire. Malamit, Shal Yisrael, Mahaviv and Oisabeish, Kedelikayim by Mitzvahs Koli Divrei Meir. They would roast, they would singe the stalks in fire, so to keep what the Torah said, Kalu be'esh. But Chacham disagree. They hold the word Koli means a vessel. That means you put the grains in a vessel that was perforated. That's what we say. We go to Amid Beis. Ein ur lashon kali alidava acher. Ein lashon dava kalil. It refers to a vessel. Rashi says bekli nechoishes kolol, a copper vessel. Haketzad abuv shel kloyos hayisham, a copper vessel that was meant to roast kloyos. and Vayamrukav Kivra, it had perforated holes like a sifter. So the fire should go into the vessel and singe the grain. Aviv Koli Gorish. Any Adea im Aviv Koli im Gorish Koli. I don't know whether you should singe it while it's a grain or after it's grounded. Kishu Oimer Bo'esh Hifsik Inyan. So the Torah interrupted it and put they put Aviv Kolu Be'esh and then Gorish. The Torah first tells you singe it first and then grind it down. Carmel, what type of grain? Rach, it should be soft. Umal, something that could crumble into your hands. Now the Gemara just says something and goes off on a tangent. That a very interesting thing that the Gemara is going to say, that sometimes in Hebrew, in the Chumash and the Tanakh, you'll have a word, but it really alone, it doesn't have a meaning. It's just a combination of different words. It's just like ETA. ETA means each letter means something different. So same thing. There's words in the Torah that stand for different things, but it itself is not a word. The Chenu Oimer, like the pasuk says, Carmel is one of those words the Gemara is going to get to. So a man brought to the godly man the first breads and 20 lechem barley and carmel bitzikloinoi. So what does tzikloinoi mean? Ba, it stands ba, come, v'yatzak lanu, pour for us, v'chalnu, and we'll eat it, v'nava haise, and it will feel good. So bitzikloinoi is like an abbreviation of different words. V'oimer, there's another pasuk. This also be'ahavim. Nisa v'nitem v'nala v'nismach v'nischate ba'ahavim. We're gonna lift and give and go up and be happy and sin, I think, with our lovers. So nisalsa is a type of word that's combined of many different words. V'oimer, says the pasuk knaf rononim nenasa. The ostrich is the wing of the ostrich ne'elaso. What does it mean? What does the wing of the ostrich do? Noise, it carries, oila goes up, v'nischata, and it drops the egg into a tree. So that's v'oimer. Here's another pasuk. Ki yorat haderech l'negdi. Bilam, the Bilam said, Ki yorat haderech l'negdi. What does yorat mean? Yirasa ra'asa natsa. The Malach said to Bilam that it saw me, got afraid, and it veered off the path. So yorat is not a word; it's just a combination of different words, like eta, like I said. And the Bei Reb Shmuel Tana, here's the same word, Carmel. When the Torah said Carmel, it's not a word Carmel. It means kar mole, full of like a stuffed pillow, right? So that means that Rashi explains that the I guess the beard of the grain should be full, should be complete. Mavushal kol tzarka, it should be completely ripened. Okay, and full of seeds. Now we learned in the Mishnah machlekes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Kiva and the Chamim whether yechayev a maisrus or not. The rest of the grain that was not used, what did they do with it? The ones that from the harvest. So Omar Rav Kahana said, the reason why Rav Kiva says that it's not potter for Meisrus, whoever buys it off Hegdish, because Hegdish finishing a product does not exempt it for Meisrus. So if you buy it off Hegdish, they are obligated to make Meisrus. What does it mean, complete a product? Here's the picture. You complete a product. Once it's completed, as you know, it's chayav meisus. That's called meiruach. You put it into a pile. So if this object, if all the steps were done to create this on the screen, so then it's chayav meisus. But if Hegdish did it, if Hegdish owned it and did it, it's exempt for meisus. Comes along Rav Kahana and made a chiddush that Rav Kiva argues, and he says that even if Hegdish did it, if you buy it off, you're obligated to meisus. Master Rav Sheshes asked the question against Rav Kahana, and this will end. What did they? The Brisa says, what did they do with the leftovers? of the 3 son that was harvested for the oimer. Okay, the Chacham says that anybody could buy it, is obligated to challah if he makes a bread out of it, and exempt from maisus. Rabbi Kiva machaya b'challah b'maisus. Rabbi Kiva says you're obligated in challah and maisus. Amr loy. So they Chachamim asked to Rabbi Kiva, "Poidi miat gizva yechiev shechaya b'challah upatem in a maisus." The Chachamim say to Rabbi Kiva, but don't we know that when something is in Hegdish's hands, it becomes exempt from maisus? If after they sell it to you, if it was in Hegdish's hands and then they sell it to you, after it became obligated in maisus, you, the purchaser, are exempt from maisus. So that's what the Chachamim said to Rabbi Kiva. Then if Rabbi Kiva argues on that, the Meruach Hegdish ain't a poita, that if something is in Hegdish's hand and completed by Hegdish does not exempt you from maisus, my kamrile, what is the Chachamim saying? That's precisely what Rabbi Kiva argues. Rabbi Kiva argues and holds Biruach Hegdish does not exempt you. If it's finished by Hegdish, it doesn't exempt you from maisus. Rabbi Kiva Mechai B'chal V'maisris L'fish Lo Nitnu Mois Ela L'Tzarech Lehem. Rabbi Kiva's reason is something different. The reason why is when you purchased it, when Hegdish bought that barley, they only bought enough to make it isarin. The rest never had kedushas Hegdish on it, and that's why Rabbi Kiva says it's chayav b'maisus. Hegdish was very careful only to buy the end result, which was the isarin, but the rest was never kedushas Hegdish, according to Rabbi Kiva, and that's why Rabbi Kiva says it's chayav b'maisus. Elam Rabbi Yachin, you're right. Talmud Arachu b'fiv shar Rabbi Kiva. It's a known statement, teaching in the mouth of Rabbi Kiva. Shlei nitnu moyes, the Beis Hamikdash did not pay money, el l'tzarech land, only what they needed for. They weren't going to pay extra to buy 3 sign if they didn't need it, if they're not going to end up using it. Okay, we will stop right over here. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.